We're going to go right to a recap and then talking about the lifestyle changes that make this possible, make this work for people. Because there's no getting around it. This is work and time and space, as well as a lot of benefits to our lifestyle. And they're things that we need to look at and make conscious decisions about. So just to recap, what we've been looking at is that the biggest source of solar energy capture, which is where all our food comes from on the planet, is grasslands, by which we mean stuff that's growing ground cover and it ain't trees, right? And that because we can't eat most of that, but we want to convert it, especially with a planet that has a lot of folks on it, we use, just as our most ancient ancestors did, we use grazing animals, and most particularly ruminants, to convert solar energy captured by leaves into one step, highest quality nutrients available, fats, proteins, and sugars, plus the stuff that will feed the soil so that the next generation of plants growing up out of that is a stronger, better, more diverse generation than it was. And the soil will be growing in its ability to continue producing that into the future, every year laying down a fund of soil and a bank account of carbon in the soil and of water in the soil that makes that land more resilient, so that weather events, insect cycles do not interrupt the availability of food to the human beings and the other beings on a farm. So we looked at harvesting sunlight with ruminants, and then all the different ways that ruminants feed everything on the farm, the humans, the pigs, the poultry. We didn't talk about sheep, but when we have orphan lambs, they're on milk, and of course when they're on their mamas, they're on milk. And of course sheep are ruminants anyway, they're part of that harvest cycle. And then we looked at the ways that keeping those nutrient flows tied back into the farm via manures and grazed, green manures and grazed cover crops, keeping our nutrient cycles pouring back into the farm, lays down a fund of fertility, feeds the animals, plants, and humans without reference to off-farm inputs, and keeps the whole cycle deepening in its resilience. We want to go on to talk about the lifestyle changes and choices that you're faced with when you want to start farming this intensively. That's our community picture. Yeah.
One of the things that we find is that now that we're doing this, we're all about food. I mean, that's what we spend all of our time on. And when we reflect back, that was mankind. You know, not that long ago, he was all about food. And all you have to do is look at the Little House on the Prairie books and all those kinds of things. They're all about food. And that's what we've learned, is that food starts to become the most important thing, our most important work.
The only reason...
We're not doing computers. We don't have a TV. We don't spend our time with all those things. We're about food.
The only reason that modern Americans don't know that food is like the big issue, it's like really important. It's one of our great joys, and it's our most basic need after water, and in one sense beyond water. The only reason we don't know is that we're the products of an agricultural system that has overproduced for the last 70 years or so, and we have tons and tons of the stuff around. So we think, you know, isn't that kind of a minor issue? Like, I'm an adult human being. Shouldn't I be thinking about other things? If you want to change your perspective, do 2 weeks of mission work anywhere. And you'll go right back to thinking, wait a minute, food is really what we're here about, because it's what we can give to ourselves and our families and our neighbors that'll keep us here enjoying one another's company, enjoying the beautiful earth for another year.
And this kind of brings us back to where we started from, that the farm is about providing what we need, okay? And so food, the food that we're dealing with, could be the food that we're selling, could be the food that we're exporting, but it's not. It's the food that we're consuming or that the animals are consuming. So we are not about selling these things off. Occasionally we'll have surplus, and then that surplus can be exported off. But we're trying to find ways to use it, and this teaches us how to eat seasonally. Okay, because if we're not eating from Kroger's, that really eliminates a lot of the things. We're eating from the farm, and the farm is only giving us at certain times. I remember my dad, who was a Dust Bowl, Oklahoma, 11 kids in a 2-room house, and during the watermelon season, they ate a lot of watermelon, you know, because that's what there was on the farm. So again, we're moving back toward that in the way that we are trying to farm, and then it affects the way that we live, which we like. I can imagine some people saying, well, I don't want to live like that, you know. I think we've got some sons who are not sure that they want to live like that.
I don't agree with that. Our boys all want to farm. They may not want to milk cows, but they want to farm. So one of the places that makes a difference is not only what we eat when we eat it, but the condition in which we eat it. So when you raise all your own food, one of the decisions you're making when you make that decision is, I'm going to be there to put this food up when it's in its peak condition, and I'm going to put it up in the way that makes it the most palatable for my family, that's most sustainable over time. Ergo, the freezer is probably at the bottom of the list most of the time, right? We're going to be making the decision to acquire new skills, most of which are going to come way easier than they sound. So we do a lot of dehydrating, a lot of fermenting, a lot of curing, and a fair amount of canning. I've heard the people say, oh, don't you know it has no nutrient value once it's been canned? Well, my gut's been telling me something different for 30 years, so I still think there's a lot of nutrient value in my canned foods, my canned meats, canned vegetables. Those are all lifestyle changes that happen, that I can only eat a thing when it's available. I can only eat it in the forms that I can put it up in. There's a lot of forms there. I didn't get to talk very much about processing dairy for human beings, and I want to say here that cheese making and its difficulty is highly misunderstood in our culture. If somebody told you there is only one right way to make either pasta sauce or bread, you would know they were kidding you, right? Because everybody makes it differently, and most of us make it differently every time we make it. Cheese is a lot more like that. The big difference is that because raw milk is highly digestible, not only to you, but to everything else that lives in your kitchen, including all the mold and bacteria that you don't notice because they're indigenous to your kitchen. When you first start processing raw milk in your kitchen, you have to have the resilience to keep trying when things don't go well. That's why you have a pig out back. And keep trying, and eventually your kitchen becomes a raw milk friendly site. There's a reason why almost every type of cheese is named with a place name, and that's that different areas harbor and are friendly to different bacteria, molds, and fungi. That being the case, the ones that are pleasant for you to eat, right, are specific to those places, and therefore they're the ones that flavor the cheeses that come from those places. So cheddar comes from a place in England. I think it was called cheddar, I don't know. Camembert and Roquefort and Gouda, these are all named for the region or the human being who was behind the first development of a cheese that was flavored with those bacteria, molds, and fungi. And your kitchen will become that place, but only if you persist. So I want you to know, cheese making is a food processing choice that is intimidating to a lot of people, especially hard cheese. Everybody's seen how you can add citric acid and rennet to some milk and make instantaneous wizardry mozzarella. You can make mozzarella without the citric acid just by waiting a little longer. But you can make hard cheeses just by keeping on trying. I am no prize-winning cheesemaker, but I put up several hundred pounds of hard cheese, half of it in the spring and half of it in the fall every year, and that's the hard cheese that feeds my family. And my grandkids won't eat any other kind. They won't eat store hard cheese, not because they know it's good for them, but because they like it better. It's going to vary over the year depending on what forages your cow's eating and what airborne molds, bacteria, and fungi are flavoring your cheese, but it's generally always going to be good after that first adjustment period where your kitchen is becoming a milk-friendly place. Lifestyle changes.
Okay. The food is the primary way that we save cash, okay? Because we just don't have to spend much money on food. We figure that we provide for ourselves and our animals like close to 90% of all that from the farm. But that's not the only way. So we started off by looking at the basic cash needs of a typical person, usually in the city or, or whatever. They would have to have food, clothing, shelter, energy, health, transportation, education, entertainment.
Typically energy here, we're not talking about gasoline so much as heat.
And then we move to the farm. So the person says, okay, I want to move to the farm, I want to, and what they discover is that actually they're adding a whole bunch more cash needs, okay? So now I've got to have seeds and tools and animals and feed and equipment and infrastructure, and our friend is right in one sense, that only the rich people can afford to farm because it just, or they say that, how to make $1 million.
You inherit $1 million, what would you do with it? I'd just keep farming until it was all gone,
yeah.
Right?
So now we have just only added more cash needs. Okay, but now how can the farm start to provide for those cash needs? And that's what I think that we have to do. Instead of saying, how can the farm provide the cash
to
fulfill all those things, how can the farm eliminate my cash needs? Okay, so obviously with food it is. Shelter, I have 5 boys to start off with, and then 2 girls, and then the youngest son. And they're amazing at what they pick up. And part of it has to do with their father's incompetence. So I turn things over to them, and I say, James, what am I going to do? So we're out baling hay, and the baler breaks down. And to me, a baler is this huge piece of equipment. I have no idea what to do with a baler. I'm totally intimidated by it. And James says, we can figure this out. I said, okay, so we get the manual. He figures out that there's some belts that are broken, and then there's one piece in there that really needs to be replaced. So we call up to find it, to get the replacement on it, and it was going to cost us almost the cost of the baler. Huge amount of money. And so my son says, well, why don't we just grease it and just keep it greased? So now we grease it every few hours as we're baling, and a piece is never worn out. How did you do that? What made you think that? Well, it's growing up on a farm, okay? It's growing up and having to solve these problems on the farm. And so we have the 4 oldest and then the next 4, and the oldest of the next 4 is a son. And I said to him, because we've been off and on, we've been butchering. My oldest, was the one who we butchered with first. And I said to William, how long have you been butchering? And he said, all my life. And he has been. He's been butchering all his life. And I didn't even think about that. Luke hasn't been butchering all his life, but William has been butchering all of his life. He knows the farm better than I know the farm in many ways. It's the only life he's known is this life of the farm. So for shelter, we bought a sawmill. Again, I'm intimidated by it.
He bought it as a big toy for the boys, right? And he was like, they'll like this.
Sawmills.
It was secondhand. We couldn't go out and buy a big
And
house.
James has stepped in, and he figured out how to use it. And so they built a barn.
We didn't show you a picture, but this is a big barn that they built.
It's huge beams that go up, and then he also did all the 2x4s and all the 2x6s and everything else. I don't even know how he did it, because I was gone at the time that he was doing most of that cutting.
And that's all from wood off the farm, right? And the scrap lumber heated the house for that winter.
Right. Energy, we only use wood for heating the house.
I like to cook on wood. We're not quite. It's like the composting toilets. I get a certain amount of pushback.
Health is a big problem, except that, health insurance, I don't know how we cut that down. So Joel talks about alternative systems. So in terms of schooling, we figured that one out. We homeschool. In terms of health system, we haven't quite figured that out.
Sean means health insurance, not health or health care.
Right. How do we get out of this? How can there be an alternative system? Well, there kind of is. There's a Christian system that we're a part of.
They're not all Christian, but they're called
Samaritan.
Subscription-based, right? It's cost-sharing groups.
Still expensive, but we're more or less outside of that system. And the food, we're desperate for people to figure out how to get out of the food system, because people need to get out of the food system. We've gotten out of the food system.
As far as our health goes, So there's 10 of us. It's not like we don't get colds. My oldest son is 31. We've had illnesses for 10 people over those 31 years that required some kind of assistance, maybe 8 times. Then some of those are things like a broken bone or metal in an eye, right? Illnesses that actually required help, I think twice. We had 2 respiratory illnesses over that 31 years times 10 people that actually required some help.
And we would say an awful lot as a farm.
Yeah, it's just it's good food and lots of exercise.
Right, and lots of exercise.
Wendell Berry identifies food independence as, especially small local food systems, as being the bedrock basis of national security. And as soon as you think about it, you know he's right. Because the minute something happens to interrupt our just-in-time food delivery system, we're in big trouble. But if we have small localized systems, we have so much resilience. You can hurt us, but you can't kill us.
Well, and we don't hurry to Kroger's when the storm's coming. I mean, we hurry down to the basement and get some food out of the cellar. But now, there are other things like education and, of course, homeschooling. But with our education, instead of doing a lot of going out, well, I'm not going to, I think going to seminars and stuff like that is good. But we do a lot of just...
We like seminars.
Yes, we jump in. You know, we go buy a cow, and we brought the cow home, and then we figured it out, and then the cow had a calf, and the calf died, and we didn't know what we were going to do. So we started milking it, and boy, was I frustrated. Okay, I was very frustrated because how do you milk this thing? How do you get milk on? How do you do all that?
She's kicking him. She's putting her foot in the bucket.
Right. But that only lasted about a week. And then, so it's really good, and it was a great education.
The other place where education comes into this is that when you're raising kids and you're thinking, how do I prepare this kid for the world? I think there's 2 decisions we're trying to make. What is the good, and how do we make this a happy, wonderful person? And 2, how's he going to pay his bills as he grows up? Those are actually, a lot of times for a parent, rather divergent questions. Because the things that at the present moment look like they make for financial success are not inherently inclusive of the things that we consider the most important for a healthy, happy human being, right? Like financial success. Get really good at computers. Health. Appreciation of beauty and nature. It's not happening at the same time, right? I'm not saying they can't both happen. I'm just saying it's not the same decision, right? So our decision to home educate, which we're not trying to sell to anybody, but our decision to home educate does have a direct link to our decision to inhabit a piece of land and improve it and make it a better place. When you've got kids who are just panting to go outside and dig a garden or raise an animal or cut down a tree and build something with it, the school bus doesn't look nearly as attractive as it does when you've got a bored kid sitting there playing with his computer, who, you know, playing with whatever his handheld device is, who at the end of the day is going to be cranky and tired because he didn't get any exercise, right? And is also maybe... Thank you, Meredith. So our decision about homeschooling really does relate straight back to our lifestyle choice. And this sounds like slavery, and it isn't. My kids are happy as pigs in mud to be homeschooled and to be allowed to go outside and do work on the farm for 6 hours a day.
Yeah, and I would say that the best thing that they've gotten from it is problem-solving skills. It's amazing the things that do not intimidate them, that intimidate the heck out of me, and that they will jump right into. And the other thing is giving them the freedom to find the thing that they really want to do. So we've got a wood carver, we've got somebody who loves animals, we've got a...
We've got a son who's graduating from Notre Dame in architecture in just a couple of months.
And he does...
He's a timber framer. And he's looking at designing communities on a small scale that are human-friendly and environmentally friendly. So we're proud of that boy.
We've got a horseshoer, a butcher, a sheep shearer, You know, they've just got a tremendous number of skills that they wanted to do. And they have picked them up on their own. They didn't go to school for it. They would apprentice to me, which is a much better system than the
I'm fairly sure none of us is ever going to be rich. Yeah, but that's okay. We're going to eat better than the rich people do.
That's true. But you have a rich life.
We have a great life. We have a terrific life. Our family, this is a lifestyle thing. Our family sits down at the table 3 times a day and eats a meal off China. Now, there's some folk working off the farm, and so they're not home for the middle of the day. But we cook and eat 3 meals a day. That sounds like labor, and that sounds like regimentation. It is neither. It is visiting time. It is terrific food. It is order. It is nutrition. It is health. And we spend a lot of time together. And then we sit at the table. We're all related by blood, and we're the parents. Our kids will sit there at the table with us, lean back, and make observations about life, and extend, make fun of their father a lot, and extend jokes for 10 minutes. They'll be passing some piece of wordplay back and forth, just because we like to be together. We have a full-time apprentice who is there because she dropped in one day and she loved it and she never left. We've had other short-term apprentices. We have neighbors. We have people who just come spend the day because it's nice to be together.
So the farm becomes our community and our entertainment. Yep. I mean, we don't need to spend money to go out to the movies, and we don't do that. Even vacationing, we can't vacation all at the same time. We have to kind of rotate vacations because somebody's got to be there milking. And we're all, I think we're all good with that. I don't think that
we are. Our oldest boys, who now have their own social and work commitments, right, tend to take their vacations at different times, and they cover for us when those of us who are full-time employed on the farm want to be able to take 3 days in the summer and go to the lake and put the kayaks in the water and fish. And that's just about how long most of us can stand to just play, about 3 days in length. So the other boys will cover for us then.
And one of the things that's been important is that my wife has been able to stay home all the time that's happened. That's a lifestyle choice in terms of the way that we have wanted to live, that our kids always came home to mother being there. But also, if you're going to be on a farm, it's really hard if there's not somebody who's committed to the farm full time. So that's her job, that she's the primary farmer.
I'm not a kept woman. I'm not stuck here. I haven't failed to actualize myself. I'm just lucky enough that I get to do exactly what I want to do. When I was a little girl, I wanted to be 3 things. I wanted to be a farmer, a potter, and a writer. Guess what I do as a grown-up? I'm those 3 things. How lucky can you get, right? Doesn't make much money, but it's an awful lot of fun. Notice that we covered every single slot there. Our clothing is more basic. It is all secondhand because who the heck cares anyway? It costs us very little. Transportation, we don't have to spend as much money on gas now that not so many people are off farm. With our tools, we buy good ones and they don't have to be replaced that often. With our kind of farming, equipment and infrastructure, we say minimize there. Most farmers would say, you don't got any. No equipment, no infrastructure to speak of. Yeah. So by removing things from the list of things that we have to generate cash and then purchase, we've put them within our direct reach. Our actions make them possible, and that hugely reduces the amount of cash. If you stopped and thought about how much would it take for 10 people to live, right, on the level we live on with all our basic needs met, I'm afraid to be a whole lot more than his paycheck. Right. So, questions, observations, suggestions?
I'm amazed at what you guys do, but one question I keep coming back to is, what do you buy at the grocery store?
Chips.
Tortilla chips.
So there are
tortilla chips. He won't drink my wine. My wine's good, but he won't drink it. So we buy his wine.
I like cheap sweet pink.
We buy coffee, sugar, herbs and spices. It's just not a very big percentage.
It's the Little House on the Prairie list. Yeah. When they talk about going to the store, it's very similar to that same.
I mean, if you looked at our grocery list, you'd recognize the things on it, but it's not very much for the number of people we're feeding, and it's not a very long list. Yeah. If we want fruit out of season, like he likes oranges in the wintertime, we'll buy those.
And we shouldn't do the chips, but
Toilet paper.
No, we're from the Southwest. I put up a lot of salsa, and I do not make corn tortilla chips, so I'm going to buy them, by golly. I love them.
yes.
Do you have any comments on root cellars and how you store root crops in the winter?
Yeah, we built a root cellar when we moved into that place because there was a man on the place that had a backhoe, and we thought ahead and said, what's a big hole we're going to want? It could have been better designed, but it's
Yes.
great.
I don't know how well it drains. It would be better if we had a better French drain system around it because it gets pretty wet in there. We do have a stack that goes out of the top, and I think at one time we had a fan that helped take that moisture out, and I think that would be an improvement on that. But we just have shelves around the outside, and we just stack
Very
the potatoes in there. And
The other issue is that our home farm is mostly on a south-facing slope. If I could have put it on a north-facing slope, it would have worked better. It does get a lot of sunlight. So my cheese cave and my root cellar are both on a south-facing slope. I try and shade them out, but those temperatures do go up a little bit high in the summertime.
Is it a separate structure, or is it part of your basement?
the root cellar is a separate structure, and the cheese cave is underneath one part of our house. Now, we have since then acquired this second house, that, if you can call it that, which we have.
It's a beautiful
Yes,
house.
it is now, that we have redone, and it's got some basement space that we might be able to utilize for.
And it's on a north-facing slope.
Cheese cave or something like that, but it's a little bit of a walk, so that's a little bit harder to do.
We have managed roots without a root cellar. And it was an issue for us because to clamp them, that is dig a hole, put them in it, cover them with straw, cover it with dirt, and hold them that way, so like an improvised root cellar. To clamp them deep enough in our climate that they're not going to freeze, we'd have to dig an awful darn big hole, especially to hold 3,000 pounds of mangel So we actually stored those outside. They did freeze. We'd bring a sack into the basement, let it thaw, take it down and feed it out, right? But a root cellar is a super valuable thing to have.
Yep.
What's your frame? Is it block?
Concrete block.
It was poured in place. Was it poured in place?
No,
you're
it was
right.
concrete block.
The roof was poured.
Yeah.
I was wondering if there was a moment where you two decided together, it's like, we're going to be farmers now.
I'd say that was even before we married, that we both knew that we wanted to live this way. We've always been very community interested, and I think we knew we wanted to live on a farm. And then when I came up to Franciscan University to teach up there, then we would come back to Oklahoma on the summers, and we would be on the farm at Oklahoma, and we would do some farming there.
His folks were farmers.
We knew we wanted to farm, and we just didn't know how we were going to do it. And then we bought that cheap farm that we thought would get us to the next step, and we discovered that it was farm enough.
Plus all the borrowed land. At this point, there's like 80 acres of borrowed land that we use around us.
So yeah, I think that we knew from the beginning that that's where we wanted to end up.
When we first married, we kept chickens and a big garden on some land belonging to the university we worked for, and it was a mile away, and we just walked down and take care of stuff. Only problem was it was right in the middle of a big city. So we had those chickens in a chicken house and big padlock on the door. And we had to admire all the skill sets that this guy must have had, who would break into that chicken house and take 2 at a time every Sunday until they were gone, right? He must have known a lot about, like, cuisine and managing. Anyway, so it's hard sometimes to go to farm at a distance, but we did it anyway. To the extent that we could, we did it anyway, because it's what we wanted.
Yes?
How did y'all meet each other?
Went to school together. She came over to the theater.
I picked him up. I came into the place where he was working, and I thought, So I made sure he knew where I'd be that night, and he showed up.
Yeah. She was very kind.
Thank you, everybody. It's time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. You are a great involved audience.